Guys, they actually talked about it. Let's get into it. So we know The View was on spring break this past week, and I recently just did a video basically discussing why I'm so upset with The View right now. But on their first day back, they came out swinging. So let's review their first segment where they discussed the college protest regarding the Israel and Palestine conflict.
A lot has been going on since we've been gone. Yeah. And particularly on college campuses across America, they've been staging protests over the Israel-Hamas war, with demands ranging from an immediate ceasefire to calls for colleges to divest any interest in Israeli-affiliated businesses. Obviously, and let's be very clear about this, no one supports any anti-Semitic hate speech and students fearing for their safety. But do they have the right to peacefully protest about ending violence? Isn't this part of being an American, and also standing up when you see something that's wrong? And I know there are lots of actors in the middle of this, but let's talk about these students.
Well, that is the fundamental question. There's a right to free speech and a right to assembly, but Jews also have a right to feel safe on college campuses. I talked to students who I taught, who actually withdrew from her semester at her school mid-semester because she felt unsafe for what she was seeing on her college campus. Here's what I will say is,
I think there's a major point, and Alyssa just jumps right over it, when Whoopi says, let's keep it to the students. Do the students have a right to protest? And then Alyssa immediately goes into, like, Jews have the right to feel safe and, you know, not be the victims of anti-Semitism, which is correct. I agree with that 100%. But if 95%, which I would actually say is probably a much higher percentage, if 95+% of the students that are protesting are peaceful, and not only peaceful in terms of like physical action, but in terms of their rhetoric as being anti-war, then focusing on the ancillary people, the agitators within this movement that are, in my opinion, probably from the right, or people that just want to start up some mess or to, you know, invalidate the anti-war protest, why give them time and attention? But that's what Alyssa is going to do. That's what she's hired for.
I will say is, as a Lebanese American, I'm disgusted seeing Hezbollah flags, a terrorist organization, fly on American college campuses. And I understand that these young people are coming out protesting for peace, protesting for a ceasefire. But I also want to say there was a ceasefire before October 7th. Israel has proposed.
That is a lie. Whenever someone says there was a ceasefire before October 7th and Hamas ruined that, that's actually not true. As I tie in Mehdi Hassan,
Israeli officials have told so many lies since October the 7th with so little pushback from the media that it's hard to keep up. So here from Zeteo is the first in a new segment we're calling Debunked. The top 7 lies about Gaza debunked. Lie number 1. There was already a ceasefire on October the 6th, and Hamas broke it. You see it said everywhere by Benjamin Netanyahu, by Hillary Clinton. They all say it, and yet it's completely false. Just 2 weeks before October the 7th, Israeli airstrikes hit Gaza for the 3rd day in a row. And on October the 4th, Gaza Strip protesters received bullet wounds to ankles, medics report. Does that sound like a ceasefire to you? Even over in the occupied West Bank, before Hamas's attack on October the 7th, Israeli forces had already killed a record 234 Palestinians. If there was a ceasefire in place before October the 7th, nobody told the Israeli military.
and this information is easily found. And I refuse to believe someone like Alyssa, who has worked in the State Department, does not know this fact. But she's perfectly fine with saying that there was a ceasefire. Yes, maybe in name and in policy there was, but was it actually being upheld? No, it was not.
There, Hamas has rejected them, and Hamas's own charter in Article 13 states that it rejects any peaceful solutions, any negotiated pieces. And beyond that, we have seen we have seen this language go into something that is far more radical, anti-Semitic, saying that Jews do not have a place on campus. I spoke to the brother of Alex Edelman, who we had on the show, the comedian, AJ Edelman. He had his yarmulke ripped off on campus. He had somebody grab his neck simply for existing as a Jew. People need to call this out. Jews are living in fear of white nationalists on one side and far leftists who are frankly siding with terrorists in some cases on the other side.
I believe that taking it away from the actual content of the protest and taking it to what place does a university have in this, civil disobedience and free speech have made this country better in a lot of instances. My problem here is that there is a point it crosses over. Like even Dr. King quotes about you have to be civil and you have to accept your consequences for whatever that is. They are now shutting down the fundamental primary purpose of a college. There are people that send their kids to school to learn. And right now, this is imposing on the entire part. That's when your civil rights, I think, on a college private institution. The
protesting is supposed to break the status quo. So when she says that, you know, when it turns into like stopping kids from learning or stopping the actual functions of wherever they're protesting, that's the point of protesting. It's supposed to shake things up to get people to listen. If people didn't sit in at lunch counters in the 60s, would black folks be able to eat in those same restaurants now, today? No. You have to break up the status quo in order to make things better. And it's just so crazy to me that we can look at those examples and applaud those, but we cannot see that happening in real life, in real time, and applaud that as well.
Look, I fled dictatorship. I fled civil war in Nicaragua. And one of the things that distinguishes us from many other countries is that in this country, we have the right to protest peacefully. We have the right to assemble peacefully. We have the right to freedom of speech. Again, the line to me is when it puts other people's safety and welfare at risk. That is a difference. The part that I wish we need to focus on, though, is that this all could end tomorrow, could end today, if Hamas released the hostages. We're now talking about this war that has spilled into American soil.
Funny enough, there's only one, since the hostages have been taken, Israel is the only one that's on record currently of killing hostages, which were Israeli hostages.
Ideological war with each other. And we are not talking about the 129 hostages that are still being held, hopefully alive, by Hamas and not being released. And I think it's okay to disagree and criticize and attack Netanyahu and it not equated with Israel.
I think it's okay to criticize Israel. I think it's okay to criticize Netanyahu. I do not think it's okay to criticize Jewish people as a whole. If we are having a conversation about whether or not Jewish people have the right to exist, that is an issue, and I'm not here for any of that. If anyone is protesting and standing with that belief, that's ridiculous. To be an activist for the anti-war movement, to protest Netanyahu, to protest Joe Biden, to protest Israel, that's perfectly fine. And don't let anyone tell you any different.
And not equate it with Jews. I think it's okay. I think it's deserved to hate Hamas and not equate it with Palestinians. And the only thing I want to remind Americans, though, as they're protesting is, and we've heard it. We've heard them call Joe Biden, a genocidal assassin and all sorts of things. There is not one group that anybody is protesting over that will be better off under Donald Trump.
And if you guys watch my videos, you know that is a major annoyance of mine. It always goes like, yeah, you may not like what Joe Biden's doing, but Trump's going to be worse. Well, Joe Biden is the one with the power. Like, I for the life of me, I don't understand. The worst thing that could ever happen is death. And that is what's happening to over 30,000 Palestinians right now. Yeah.
So be very careful that you don't cut off your nose to spite your face by not showing up to vote in November. Because the first thing that Donald Trump did when he became president was issue a Muslim ban.
I say this all the time. They love to bring up the Muslim ban, but at the rate that they're killing Palestinians, will there be any left to even be banned from this country?
I think it's, I think we need to shift the framing of these college protests, in my view. I think college campuses have been the place for anti-war protests for as far as I can remember. I think recent protests haven't even reached the scale of the major student protests that we saw in the late 1960s against the Vietnam War, or even the 1980s against South Africa's practice of apartheid. We saw calls during apartheid to divest from South African companies, and that was very successful. Nelson Mandela said he believed that's what led, in many respects, to South Africa being freed from that system. And so I think these are anti-war protests, and I think it's very distressing that we are framing these as pro-Palestinian protests.
Thank you, Sonny. It's anti-war. It is anti-war. It's not pro-Palestinian. It's not pro-Israeli. It is anti-war. This is a humanitarian crisis that's happening.
Or pro-Israeli protests. These are anti-war protests, and what they are, the students that I have spoken to at many of the Ivy League schools, and a student that I did speak to also at Emory, where a professor was thrown to the ground simply for asking the police, what are you doing to these peacefully protesting students? The students are telling me this is a humanitarian crisis.
Protest. Did you see how there were about 4 different police officers on the young man? They were all on top of him while another officer held a taser to his leg and they're letting off the taser. We talk a lot about fascism when Donald Trump gets in, but what does that look like?
What we also don't talk enough about is the fact that 35,000, mainly women and children that are Palestinians, have been murdered. What we also don't talk about, I think, enough is that for some reason, the discussion of against Israel's policies, which the UN has called war crimes, which the International Criminal Court is investigating as war crimes, what we don't say is these are people, these are civilians, and we must protect them. Even President Biden at this point has said, you have gone too far. So it has never been in my life, in my career, the criticizing policies of government is equated with anti-Semitism. And that, I think, is a far right, comes from the far right. It comes from the authoritarian leanings where they don't want students on these campuses.
Go off, Sonny. Sonny, my girl is back. My girl is back. Oh, my girl is back.
Anything, I'm sorry, I do have to do this. It is one of the great rights as an American to stand up and say something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what your color is, what your...
Quick question. I wonder, do you guys notice that she had to look off to the side when she said, I know I have to say this? Whoopi got in trouble a couple months ago, and maybe it was maybe even a year ago, when she basically said that the Holocaust wasn't about race. And, you know, she got suspended and all of that. And I feel like that they are not allowing her to speak because they're afraid that because she had that instance, that a lot of people are, you know, they may end up boycotting the show may get in trouble. And I think that's crazy.
We must teach our people how to be on the lookout. Part of our problem is the media takes what is the best clickbait. So you see the same posters or you see the same people, but you don't see the folks who are doing peaceful stuff and saying, here's what we want to do. I would caution the media to be very careful about what they're doing and how they're handling this, because what they seem to be doing is pushing a narrative that people are pushing against, which students are pushing against, which I'm thrilled to see, because I like when students get...
Whenever there is, first of all, thank you, Whoopi. Thank you. My girl is back to, Whoopi back to. But I couldn't agree more. Every great movement is usually born out of American youth. when it comes to Americans. It's always born out of American youth, and it usually starts at college campuses. Anti-war protests have historically in America have come from college campuses, and for some reason, the same thing happens. We have our government has the same response, and we just don't learn.
Mad and say, we want a change made. Unfortunately, I see that Brian is side-eyeing me, and he's starting to get annoyed because I said I wasn't going to say anything. So he knows me for the liar that I am.
So I think I was right. Yeah, they apparently are trying to keep Whoopi quiet. But anyway, guys, based off of my last video, you can see that I was a little upset about what the view has been these past couple months, and I'm not gonna lie, this was their first day back, and I did not think that they would even touch any of these topics, especially the college campus protests, and I'm just so happy that they did. Let me know what you thought about this segment in my commentary below. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. It's been great. I'm back. I'm here, doing a thing or whatever. Peace.